All right. I just want to say welcome to Night at Night tonight. We are absolutely stoked because we have an incredible night of information when it comes down to under the hood, in your car, around it. I'll tell you, tonight's theme is all about the drive with 9 at Night. Every weekday night from Monday through Friday, we have a different topic and they are fun. We have national experts that are on here and we absolutely love what we do. And you definitely want to pay attention because you're going to learn something tonight, especially when it comes to everything with wheels. And one thing is that I can't wait to introduce you to our expert. We're going to start with our car guy, and I'll tell you, he's the authentic car guy. He's been there since 1983, and it's not just fixing cars. He's been a professor, he's been a dean. He has definitely taken it from all around, and we're so excited to have him with us too. So let's get started. We are going to have a treat tonight. So here we go. And nothing better than just introducing our car guy. We have a little intro for you. Okay, and we are so excited to have him here, and welcome to our show, Steve.
Hey, Christine, it's great to be back with you. And I'm so, as you can tell, when I've talked to you before the show, I get a kick out of all of your images of motorsports and speed and power and the glamour of all that. And tonight I feel so humbled because I'm going to talk about maintenance and keeping your car from stalling in a grocery store parking lot and things like that, versus NASCAR and Formula One and all the motorsports that you and I both enjoy and you come from. I mean, I'm reminded as I watch your videos that your sense of speed and style and class and glamour and motorsports is from your own background in that, and I know that the audience is getting to know you. Some people watching would know you already, but as I discover more of the dimensions of your work, I realize, you're a motorsports gal, you're a car gal out the door. And so all that footage means a lot to you. You relate to the passion. I think nobody can deny, if they've ever ridden a horse, there's a connection between humans and horses that's very unique. When you climb on one and they relate to you and they respect you and you respect them, you navigate a trail, you work together and you ride together and you kind of become one. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about the automobile is that it really offers some of the same experiences. And I think horse buffs would probably say, how dare you try to compare a car with a horse? And I could say to horse people, how dare you compare a horse with a car? I'm kidding.
It's absolutely interesting you said that. When I used to have my radio show years ago, it was on about motorsports. Rhythm and racing was the theme. And we had a guy that was actually a Bronco rider that just won a big old belt and with his stuff. And I had a Circle 8 driver that's in there, and they were talking about how they were absolutely would not do what the other person does because they got to be crazy. Right. And we're just talking horsepower. That was my theme. It was horsepower.
Yeah. But the parallels are notable. It's interesting. I remember the drag racer. This is going to be taking us back to, before the current drag racers that are out there. But I remember when Don the Snake Prudhomme, who's so famous, who was made, world fame by the Matchbox competition celebration between the mongoose and the snake in the Hot Wheels, event back in the late 60s, early 70s. And I watched Don Prudhomme as a tyke. I was before I was even driving, I actually bagged his groceries, him and his wife Lynn, I think her name was, in Granada Hills, in Northridge, California. So there I was, he came in and got free cases of Pepsi because he was a Pepsi Cola sponsored drag racer, funny car. And you know, for a guy who had lightning reflexes on the starting line, he was about the coolest man I'd ever seen as a teenager. And he was so low key. It just was hard to imagine him with his, you know, lightning stand on the gas at the right moment with that Christmas tree turning into a green light at Top Fuel. Not, well, he did Top Fuel. He also did Funny Car. But the reason I mention him is he's a natural gifted driver. There's no question that any human, male or female, who can handle 2,000 or 3,000 horsepower or more unleashed on a starting line at a quarter mile or an eighth mile has to have incredible courage, has to have incredible athleticism to be able to navigate the car to prevent it from crashing if it gets squirrely on the starting line or halfway down the track. And Don the Snake Prudhomme always provided a beautiful exhibition of speed that usually was victorious. And to get that all dialed in required the spirit of a race car driver that every race car driver can relate to, human and machine.
Oh, I totally agree. And here's another scenario, just what you're saying in comparisons. Okay, I was a columnist for different racing, and I had to write about racing school. So I've trained everything on wheels. So I was at Rockingham Speedway, and we had Roy Hill that was teaching me. I actually did the 8th mile in 153 miles per hour in 8.9 seconds. And
so you were drag racing then at
that was
track.
Bracket drag racing. Yeah, that was in bracket as car. And then and then across the street, I had to do a story on it was NASCAR trucks. And so it was Randy Baker, Buck Baker's son, that actually taught that. So I actually got both columns in. They were monthly, or weekly. So I was able to get them both done at one time. Now, the comparison is on my radio show. I had one time where I had someone from the drag racing world, from the straightaways, okay, with the stock cars, and they both think the other's crazy. And then there's these little jokes. I'm not going to mention the jokes, but it's just
but there's the people, there's the straight liners who talk about unleashing, gobs of horsepower, and then there's the circle track people that talk about keeping it between the guardrails, and then there's the Formula One people that talk about just living and surviving the race.
I've trained on those too. At Laguna Seca.
Okay, so I respect and appreciate your background as a professional and a journalist and a broadcaster. But what I was going to say about Don Prudhomme is it's interesting. I hope I'm quoting him correctly. I'm not quoting him verbatim, but I do remember reading an article where Don Prudhomme tried to switch over to climb into a unlimited fuel power boat, or whatever, a nitromethane burning 426 Hemi or big block Chevy or whatever it was that was in that speedboat back in the 70s. But I think there was an article in Sports Illustrated or some other article that I read where Don Prudhomme was trying to switch from one type of motorsports to another. And when he got into a speedboat, I think he got spooked and thought, this is a crazy world. I'd rather be in drag racing. Now, I don't know if exactly, but the speedboat people would probably be saying I'd never climb in a dragster, but I don't know that I've got that 100% right. And if Don the Snake Prudhomme heard me get it wrong, I'd have to apologize, but I don't know that he's listening to our podcast together. I hope he would be. But what I can say with honor to him is that I respected that he would take his courage and his talent to manage a machine of any kind. I think if I'm correct here in 2022, Don the Snake Prudhomme is a mature man, but I think he's driving off-road racing now, and he is out there. Yeah.
I'm going to check into that. That's absolutely fabulous. Now, talking about Don Prudhomme being a legend, another one is John Force. Now, I want to ask you, where were you when 2000 hit? Because I was down at Moroso Speedway in Florida, where John Force and I were up in the tower holding the windows while Big Daddy Don Garlitz and Shirley Mount Downey did their big midnight drag race, and Shirley won.
Yeah. God bless her. That's great. I've interviewed her.
I have too. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, she's great. And God bless her. I was in Detroit, and I don't know how I got the opportunity to get lined up to have her as a radio guest, but she was wonderful. And, she had to put up with a lot of arrogance and conceit and egos around her. And she blew the ceiling, and no glass ceiling or any ceiling in front of her, no barriers in front of Shirley Muldowney. But where was I? I have to tell you something. You're talking about what racer?
Don Cardone, you were talking about, we were mentioned
Yeah.
Don Cardone. We also
Um,
mentioned he wanted to cross into the boat racing, and you were
you know,
going back and forth that
I got
they,
to tell you,
yeah,
yeah, you were the John Force in the tower, right?
yeah,
Let me tell you, I got to tell you a quick anecdote, and I know I've got to pack some consumer information here because you and
yeah,
I both know what kind of car guy am I for the public as a
yeah,
professional journalist and mechanic, in the past. If I'm not adding some tips, I'm just bench racing with you. But I do
right.
have to tell you that I was with my wife and two kids. We were in Virginia City, where the Bonanza was supposed to have taken place. Lauren
Mhm,
Green and anybody who's a thousand years old like me
mhm,
would have grown up with Bonanza. I'm kidding, a baby boomer. Lauren Green and Michael Landon and Dan
mhm,
Blocker, Pernell Roberts, these characters that were in this Bonanza Western. Um, I have to tell you that I really enjoyed Virginia City discovering it. And I've been there just beyond high school with a friend of mine once on a trip. Virginia City's outside of Reno in California. And the reason I mentioned Virginia City is it's a tourist attraction, but it's a legitimate ghost town that's alive. The mine shafts are there, the gold diggers are there, the old hotels, the old theater, the old restaurants, and it's a charming place. You can get a hotel room in an old time hotel and go get a meal in an old time restaurant. It's just a throwback, and of course it's supposed to be the city where Bonanza, the team, went in to buy their groceries and what have you. So it's a true living Western town. Why do I mention in the context of motorsports? Because I decided to take my wife and kids into a mine shaft to take a mine tour. They don't go deep into the mountain, but they
mhm,
go enough into the mountain that you start to see the structure of how a mine shaft is built, and you see samples of different types of ore and gold and what have you they have displayed.
mhm,
And we are waiting to do the tour, and there are like maybe 10 or 12 of us to do this private tour you pay for.
mhm.
And the tour guide said, we're waiting for one last guest. His family's here, but he's not arrived yet. And that individual is John Force, the drag racer.
Oh,
So here I
yeah,
am, a car guy in the group, right? And he's deciding, it's been about 12, 15 minutes or so, maybe 10 minutes, but he says, we'll give him another minute or two, to see if John Force makes it. Courtney Force was there. I don't know which other Force, the other daughter. What's her name? I don't know. Beautiful ladies, right? And very talented. So I guess John Force, Mrs. Force was probably there with her two daughters. John was out, I don't know, doing something in the gift shop or whatever. And he did not make it through the gate to get the tour. So
mhm.
what did the car guy do, right? What am I thinking?
Ah,
Hey, he's a fellow car guy. I'm nothing. He's a big shot. I got to go let him know if he's out there. I got to go yell out the door. You got
very
your last
good.
chance to make the tour.
That's
So I go
awesome.
out. It was fun. So I go out into the lobby, and he's wandering around. He's already been locked out. And I open the door and I say, hey, John, come on in, and he doesn't know that I'm just a fan and a friend through motorsports, right? I'm just a guy, but he's a star. And
Yeah.
he doesn't question why I'm inviting him in. And the crowd that's there, 12 people or whatever, they're like, oh, great, now we can go. And John comes in, and I gave him my business card, and I said, I hope I can talk to you at some point down the road. And I never
Mhm,
have, but I
mhm.
should follow up because he's quite the car guy, himself.
Nice, nice,
But
nice as
yeah,
anything. There.
oh, yeah, but I appreciate the moment with you and your audience. Just to say,
Yeah.
we all have our moments, and that was fun to meet John Force that way and do him a favor. I could say,
There.
John Yomi. I could say, Yomi, I got you in the door. But different motorsports, different motorsports have different cultures, but their commonalities in the vocabulary and the love of speed and the vicarious experience of watching people on the track and what have you. The topic, though, that we talked about going into, and thank you for the image that the audience
Yeah,
is
I'm
seeing with.
just gonna turn it over to you, okay,
Okay,
for,
all right.
uh,
So
yeah,
thank you, Christine, because the audience will understand you're a professional and you've already run through with me what you understand I'd like to do as briefly and as succinctly as I can for the audience. And that is, I was starting to say to you last week, shifting from motorsports into everyday consumerism, motorists, everyday driving, parking lots, supermarkets, freeways, highways, the garage, vacation travel, commuter to work travel. We're coming into the summer season of 2022. and people are out there, polishing up their cars as the snow melts, and we get into the wonderful sunshine and so on. We bring out the cool collector cars, we ship new cars out to dealerships, and we look at maintenance and so on. So as you sequence through the photos, you highlight there is a new car. And what I wanted to talk about briefly was last week I talked about the importance. This photo comes up, that one, and this scan tool, if you can go back to the scan tool shot. I want to pop into that for a moment. If you can hold that shot, let me just observe that last week, for those that were with us, I talked about the importance of regular oil changes, because petroleum, as I said last week, petro is rock in Latin and oleum is oil. So that essentially crude oil out of the ground is extracting rock oil. And the only reason it's anything more than crude in oils today is because of the incredible formulations and filtering of oil, refining of oil, and putting in an additive package that wears out. The detergent additives, the anti-scuff, anti-friction, anti-rust, dispersant modifiers, dispersant additives that help keep dirt and debris floating so that when the oil gets changed, the fresh oil comes into a clean engine. All those things are additives that are put in modifications, in effect making conventional crude oil turn into a partially synthetic oil by virtue of the chemical modifications of that oil. The more extensive the oil is modified, the more it becomes a synthetic. So there are partial synthetics and full synthetics. But what I wanted to note about this scan tool as it relates to oil changes and so on is I just pointed out last week that your oil, if oil is always in the crankcase, why does it wear out? It's always there. It's not the oil that wears out, it's the additive packages that deplete by heat and time and pressure and temperature and all those cycles of an engine getting hot and cold and handling condensed water inside the crankcase and trying to keep your engine protected. Those additive packages wear out. That's what wears out in motor oil, not the oil itself. The oil just becomes less efficient because the additives are what give it the ability to go 5 and 7 and 10,000 miles, depending on your manufacturer. Now, to the scan tool that the technician's holding in hand in that photo on your screen, we look at a scan tool today and we kind of think, oh, doesn't that tell the technician where the problem is and all they have to do is go change a part? And back to us, I would tell you that scan tool can be misleading for the public because it makes it look like all a technician has to do is plug that in and the car is going to tell the technician what needs to be replaced. That is not accurate. The reality is, once that scan tool gives any indication of a particular code, it might be that there's a fuel injection malfunction. An overly rich air fuel mixture like black smoke coming out the exhaust would be consistent with the visual of an overly rich engine that's not burning all the gasoline. So the unburned hydrocarbons are going out the exhaust pipe. That check could include a rich air fuel mixture, it could include a lean air fuel mixture. There wouldn't be any smoke coming out of the exhaust, but the engine would be misfiring because of the lack of hydrocarbons, the opposite end, lack of fuel. So when a technician hooks up a scan tool like this and you're a consumer or a motorist and you're thinking, what are they doing? You know what they're doing on the macro, on the big picture. You know they're getting some diagnostic information. What I wanted to clarify for you and your audience and other consumers that might be searching on the web and see this topic that we're talking about of car care, what I'd like to clarify is that one day these scan tools may be sophisticated enough that they can go that next level deeper and isolate where the root cause is. But let's take a problem like a scan tool that says on a V8 engine, you have two sides. If it's a V8 engine, it has 4 cylinders on one side and 4 cylinders on the other. And the engine is shaped like a V. Each bank has 4 cylinders, 4 pistons, 4 spark plugs. The opposite bank has, let's say if it's a V8, another 4 cylinders and 4 spark plugs, and also then 4 fuel injectors if it's a fuel injected engine. So what's that scan tool telling the technician? The scan tool can say there's a misfire on engine cylinder number 7. Well, that's right, there is a misfire. And a consumer or motorist might expect the technician to simply be able to go fix it because the engine scan tool says there's a misfire on cylinder 7. Christine, are you with me?
totally with you. I was just muted so I don't make any noises
I'm
or
sorry.
anything.
All right. Well, I'm just going to be sure that you're with me, and just like hopefully you're speaking for the audience if I'm not being clear enough. If that scan tool says there's an engine misfire on cylinder number 7,
Mhm.
then you need to know it could be the spark plug. It could be the fuel injector. It could be one of the valves is not closing properly to create compression at an adequate level. There's a leaky, worn valve, or carbon built up, some malfunction within the induction system. It could be there's electrical malfunction in the coil that produces the power for the spark plug to spark. It could be that the fuel injector is clogged or sputtering and not putting in, or it's restricting fuel flow. These are the variables that could cause that cylinder number 7, or whatever cylinder number 3, whatever cylinder has a misfire. Now it's up to the technician to have to diagnose. Is it caused by a poor fuel injector? Is it caused by a failing fuel injector? Is it a sensor, like what's called an oxygen sensor, that's malfunctioning and causing cylinders to be too rich? And cylinder number 7 is the first cylinder that malfunctions because of an overly rich fuel mixture, too much fuel. I give these examples if I can pull back to a general photo of a car and say, in the 1960s and 1970s, Christine, if I can let me just shift back to under the hood of that that engine that we have, another shot of an engine right there. Let's hold that for a minute. And if you zoom in on that, and I'm not assuming you can zoom in, but if your audience can see those blue wires, those are spark plug wires on that engine. Okay, and those spark plug wires go to what looks like a 4-cylinder engine,
Mhm.
and each of those wires hooks up to a spark plug. Well, the thing that I wanted to illustrate briefly, and I'll try to do it here as quickly as I can, is we've got cars in the from the birth of the automobile, the late 1890s into the early 1900s, we have the birth of the automobile. A couple of things had to happen for the automobile to be self-propelled, an internal combustion engine. We had to be able to take some type of liquid fuel like kerosene or gasoline, put it into a combustion chamber in a vapor form like hairspray, ignite it with a spark plug, make an explosion that causes the engine to push a piston down like a cannon, except keep pushing the piston down over and over again as it's attached to a crankshaft, which is like a bicycle pedal. When you push one down, the other goes up, and an engine operates much the same way. So as we look at an engine like we have under the hood, like this one in your photo, we can remember that in as early as 1900, 1910, 1920, what did they have? They had spark plugs. They had ignition wires or coils or things that made the spark plugs fire, and they had internal combustion in the engines. Okay, why do I give that history? Because it remained basically like that for most of the 20th century. Why am I saying that? Because the vehicle we saw growing up, all of us, whether we were born in 1990 or 2000 or 1940 or 1950, doesn't change the reality that we operate on fuel, liquid fuel. And the car had a carburetor throughout most of the 20th century. And in the 1980s, most of the manufacturers, and by 1986 or 87, all manufacturers had moved to fuel injection. What's the difference? Well, a carburetor is an imprecise device on the top of an engine that mixes air with fuel. Race cars, expensive exotic cars in the 40s and 50s, they had fuel injection well before everyday passenger cars in manufacturing. Why didn't all cars have the sophisticated fuel injection we have today? Because it was expensive to produce, and it had to be refined so it could be put into the scale of mass production. All cars today are fuel injected, Christine, and everybody listening would understand that. That's why Techron at Chevron and other things of top tier gasolines are so critical, because they have to keep those very precise fuel injectors clean. Otherwise, it's like hairspray nozzles. Or a paint spray nozzle, if it clogs up, the paint doesn't spray properly and the hairspray comes out like a liquid, like toothpaste, right? You want it to spray into a vapor. So those fuel injectors, which are also in that engine that we're looking at, that 4-cylinder engine, until the 1980s, they were very imprecise. Once fuel injection was introduced, it was introduced to help performance and fuel economy, but it was also introduced to reduce emissions, because the more efficiently we make the engine run, the more efficiently the exhaust comes out clean. So where am I going with this as we're looking at maintenance today as I wrap up, and as far as we can go in here? I want the audience to know that I think that we in the automotive industry kind of played a misleading statement to the public that I've talked to you about for a few decades. I mean, you and I've talked recently, obviously, but what I'm saying is in the 1990s, we were so excited in the auto industry to have computer controlled engines that we no longer had to have these regular tune-ups every 12,000 miles. Spark plugs, as I said last week, spark plugs last typically 100,000 miles. That used to be the life of the entire car. That used to be the life of the entire engine, Christine, right? You'd go, if you got 100,000 miles out of a 1960s car, you were happy. You'd go for an engine overhaul at 120,000. Today, these engines, like the one you see in this picture, they are machined with such precision, so much more advanced metallurgy and design and engineering. These engines can go easily 200,000 typically, often 300,000 miles with proper care. So the risk I want to encourage you and your audience to remember is that these are not maintenance-free engines. So what I mean on that point is it's not like I want to cause people to go panic and doubt what we're telling them. You have lower maintenance engines, but not zero maintenance engines. And most people kind of get that. They might say, what's your point? We already know that. Well, my point would be that the question isn't whether you maintain your cars from 1960 to 2022, it's how do you maintain them differently? And the answer to that would be preventive maintenance still matters. So brake pads and brake shoes and drum type brake cars. Disc brakes, as I mentioned, I think a week or two in this conversations with, giving you these update thoughts. It's very much like a bicycle where you clamp on when you squeeze the brakes, it actually clamps down on the rim of the wheel and slows it down. Disc brakes are very similar. Most cars today are coming out with disc brakes. Many trucks are. Some trucks still have rear brakes that are drum. But regardless of whether people understand disc and drum brakes, I propose to you that when it comes to April, May, June of 2022, you want to have your brakes inspected. You want to have an oil change done unless you had it done. You need to check your mileage and how long it's been since you last had your oil change. As I said last week, I want to encourage people to not wait till the maximum number. If it says change your oil every 10,000 miles, don't wait till 12,000 miles if you're one of these people that wants to keep the car in good shape for that 200,000 or 300,000 mile life. Change it at 8,500 or 8,000. You don't have to feel guilty that you're spending money that's not right. Your 1,500 miles less could mean the difference between oil that gives your engine that much more protection. The point being, check in your owner's manual for the listed scheduled maintenance and stay on top of that. And anybody and everybody might say, but of course, we already know that. To which I say, right, but I want to remind you with Christine to say, check your brake pads, your brake shoes, check your transmission fluid. It does matter to flush fluids. Brake fluid is hygroscopic, which means brake fluid over the term of a car driving 10 years inevitably absorbs moisture into the brake fluid. So people might say, well, the brake fluid's not low. Why should I add any more? You don't need to add any more. You need to flush it, because what happens if brake fluid absorbs moisture? The boiling point comes down. And if you're ever worried about how could brakes go out, well, if the brake fluid boils, you will put your foot on the brake pedal and push it to the floor, because the fluid will turn into like a boiling water. All the air pockets will expand into more air and so on. The liquid will become more like a vapor. How does it happen? Because brake fluid absorbs water, that moisture that inevitably gets into the brake system when every night the car cools after being warm absorbs moisture into the brake system. So without elaborating a lot more within the time I've got, I'll wrap up, is just another tip for this week. On your fluids, understand, if you trust your technician, and I hope you do, and most technicians are honest, and I want to believe they all are, but in every field of professional endeavor, there's somebody who wants to make the extra buck selling you something you don't need. How can you prevent being taken advantage of? Keep your records and notes in your owner's manual. It tells you what the service intervals are. I'm here to say, as a technician by background, flushing fluids does matter. Automatic transmission fluid, you need to check your particular vehicle in the owner's manual and talk to your technician, but it is legitimate that most cars, not all, need a transmission fluid replacement somewhere between 60 and 100,000 miles to get maximum automatic transmission life. Uh, Automatic transmission fluid gets overheated while you're towing and going up hills and driving in commuter traffic. So it does fatigue, and you want to replace it as the interval is required, as your technician can tell you. Brake fluid needs to be flushed and replaced. So does coolant. So if you're going into the season of the summer and you want to be in good shape, checking tire tread, tire pressure. If you haven't had a tire person walk you around your car to tell you how to read your tire tread, that's also in your owner's manual. Your owner's manual is a wealth of information. So I hope that gives some help, just to give an illustration of how far we've come in maintenance being reduced with cars, but we still have to get on top of these things. And with self-serve stations and rust schedules and our distraction about world conflicts and things going on right now, we've got to remember the self-serve station doesn't mean gas up and go ongoing every day. When the car's in your driveway, that's when you want to look on the driveway for any oil leaks or other fluid leaks, and go ahead and open the hood and open up your owner's manual. Right now, we're in March, April, May. This is the time to go ahead and walk through those schedules. And don't be surprised when you open up that owner's manual and you say, I didn't know this owner's manual had all this cool information that teaches me about
it
cars.
has everything in it. You know, this is so amazing. And not only that, instead of worried about taking it into a technician all the time, they have, and to get the meter to read what's going on. It could be something just as simple as if they changed the oil and they forgot to set everything again. So you can take it to an auto parts store and they'll read it for free. And then they'll give you some simple suggestions like that, so you don't have to pay quite a bit of money.
Right. I gotta say, that owner's manual, I'm amazed by owner's manuals in new cars today. I think a lot of people know what I'm talking about. Some people look at the owner's manual only after something goes wrong. My tip tonight obviously would be, I hope everybody out there understands, many people already know what I'm talking about and know more than what I'm talking about. But if they don't, I would say, pick up that owner's manual and just flip through the pages of it. I know it's a big book like a computer manual and they're like intimidating, but there's never enough time to do it right, but always enough time to do it over, right? And that's one line people say. But the other line I like to say, when I'm talking on interviews on car care or giving people tips, I always say, there's never a right time for an on-the-road breakdown. There's never a convenient time for an on-the-road breakdown. It could be in your driveway, it could be on a family vacation. Nobody's ever going to say, well, that's a perfect time for a breakdown. We don't want them. So get in the owner's manual, look at those tips on what the owner's manual has to say, check your tire pressure, inspect your tire tread, and don't overestimate what your technician can do. What you can do, just like with the human body, you can listen to the feedback your body's telling you, and you can watch your diet, and you can exercise, and all those things. Our car needs the same love as a horse.
Yeah, there you go. Steve, you're absolutely amazing. We sure appreciate you each and every week. And you can go to 9atnight.com and get the replay on here if you wanted to take more notes, or I know I'm the one, you gotta hear this. And so that's how it's 9atnight.com, and it's /podcast. Steve, you have an amazing evening, amazing week. And thank you so much for your incredible expertise and the willingness to share it with us.
My pleasure. You're terrific, Christine. Thank you. Have a good evening. Good week.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Good night.
Good night. We sure appreciate you. So right now we're going to go to our next guest, and we're absolutely excited about this guest. His name is Mike, and we've had him on last week. We're going to do a quick replay on this because it's important and what I want to emphasize on this, and I'll introduce him on this. And that's why I wore this same outfit, because it's the one I wore on this thing. But what I want to emphasize with this, here's a gentleman. He's never been in the motorsports world. He's been an avid motorsports enthusiast. And the best part about this is that there's a racetrack. You're going to hear about it, Ontario Speedway. And it's 10 years. It was the best one in the country. The very best one. It was built in 1970, around that time, and it was done and over with, and with its death, and it turned into malls and things. and 10 years later. And so he has a passion. Now, this guy is 44 years in the service through the Air Force. He's a consultant level right now, but this guy just wanted to have, take the time to put this in huge content of information to into a book. And so just kind of watch this now on with that level. But each one of you, each one of us can take just it could be a hobby, it could be something that we have, really learn about it to the point that, my gosh, this needs to be told. The whole story needs to be told. It could be in any form you can. And so that's why I really, really enjoy what Mike Allen is doing with that. So here we go. And we sure do appreciate all that he does. Allen, he's been 40 years in the Air Force. Okay, incredible. He's as an aircraft crew chief. He was an aircraft inspector. And then when you get the planes that fly up in the sky and they refuel in the sky, that's what he does. It's a KC-135 boom operator on that mission, okay, to refuel in the sky. And then he's a pilot. He went to flight school, but he retired in 2016, nearly after 40 years in the program. And since he was very young, he loved motorsports. And he, at a very young age, he grew up near Ontario Speedway. And this is what we're going to cover today and why we're doing it. But he was able to be involved in motorsports in so many facets, volunteering, being over the wall, that type of thing. And then also he has an incredible buff when it comes to history in the motorsports, been married 39 years this year, very excited. So now officially with my audio on, here is Mike Allen. Yay! So sorry, I thought that's embarrassing. And but anyway, I'm so glad that you're here because we have several videos. Mike is writing the book called The Ontario Speedway, and I'm going to let you tell us about the title and why you started to write it. So, and we're going to show some pictures.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you. I'm very excited to share my project. The Ontario Motor Speedway came and went within 10 years, pretty close to a 10-year period. It was the best speedway of its time. And a lot of current speedways can have items that can lend themselves to that one-time track. My passion for motorsports started well before I started in the Air Force. And I was a fan of the track. I used to go out there before I could ever drive a car. And how do I say this? You know, there are the kids that would hang out at the baseball field or the football field to see their heroes. Well, here I had this huge stadium and speedway show up right in my own backyard, so to speak. I lived in Covina, which was somewhat of a drive away, but it was pretty close in driving, about a half hour, 40-minute drive. Anyways, I would to see your heroes that you can only see on Wide World of Sports, and bear with my dating of that show. But now you had this mega stadium in your own backyard, and it had all the bells and whistles of all motorsports coming together on one track. Within those hallowed walls of that speedway, you not only had IndyCar, NASCAR, AMA motorcycles, NHRA drag racing, Formula One, SCCA Formula 5000 races. You had go-kart races. They filmed movies out there. They filmed television shows out there. It was a palace of speed. My book is called Ontario Motor Speedway: Racing's Paradise Lost, and it really is a testament to not only the speedway but the local region of Ontario and of Southern California. And how Ontario was impacted by the motorsport world coming to Southern California. Basically, the track was founded in the mid-'60s by a group of investors who wanted a Indianapolis of the West, as they say, and it actually was very close to the Indianapolis Speedway in design, except for a few changes. One, it had just over a 3-mile road course based inside the Speedway, somewhat similar to the layout that you would see at Indianapolis Motor Speedway today, after they modified it for the Formula One races in the mid-90s. Anyways, go forward with that. Being Southern California, it was a hotbed of motorsports here, going back to the turn of the century. And my first 7 chapters, I base a lineage of why Ontario was so important. You had a variety of race shops, you had car builders, you had the hot rod generation post-World War II, you had Indianapolis roadster builders, you had Dan Gurney, Carnelli Jones, and the local were our local heroes, and the Speedway was a perfect fit. As you see the photographs, there's one picture where the Victory Circle had the bricks from Indianapolis, and that was a somewhat a benevolent friendship between Tony Hulman and the founders of the Ontario Speedway. The bricks were on loan from the track at Indianapolis. Somewhat different than Indianapolis in that it was wider. It had visual cues that you could see all the way down the back straightaway. It also had a drag strip that was built inside the a quarter-mile drag strip that was built inside the pit lane. The pits were so wide that they could drag in there and not drive on the main 2.5-mile oval.
So, you know, what's so amazing about it, and these shots, we have so many pictures, I can't wait to share. But the overview of this track was perfect. It was immaculate. It was 5-star plus with everything. But it only lasted a little over 10 years, and then it was done and turned into a mall. And that's like death. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. It's tragic in that how it was handled. And I would say that there were certain things that were out of the Ontario, certain things that were out of the control of management, but then there was some internal issues that occurred that caused its downfall. But I will tell you, let's back up here to the very beginning when the track was built. It was built with a Hollywood imagery. It had its connection with entertainment, sports entertainment, and on top of that, it was built in the late 1960s. This was an era of where we're going to the moon. We were reaching out and performing feats of daring, and America was the leading way of moving forward. We were recognized worldwide. This track was recognized around the world as the best track ever built for its time. Back to the track design. How did Ontario come about? Well, basically, these investors had acquired some vineyard land that was adjacent to the I-10 freeway. And at the time, there was nothing out there. I mean, they had some farms and they had the burgeoning Ontario airport that was on the move to expand. But basically, they didn't have too many neighbors nearby. So the options of encroachment weren't there at that time. As you can see through the pictures, it was a palace. And let me explain how it came about. So there was a purchase of approximately $5.8 million to purchase the lands. And that was conducted by way of a couple of gentlemen. One was the original president, and that's David Lockton. Dave was the wonderkind of business at the time, and he was a lawyer and was able to get the bond issues started to purchase the Speedway. This wasn't a one person buying it. You bought into a bond, and basically, let me get my notes correct.
Now, these are the bricks from the Indianapolis, right?
Yes, yes. So basically, people would buy into ownership of the Speedway for the purpose of attending races, special events, and there was a very good proposal that the track by 1998 would be fully self-sufficient and without debt, and it was based on consistent management, also a consistent schedule. Let me expound a little bit about the Speedway itself. So it was designed by the same company that built Hearst Castle. And
wow.
yes, so it had some lineage to some of our California history here. And the track brought out the best and the brightest in design, in execution of the amenities that they had. They had a central concourse and a a restaurant that was part of the large building that you see in the photographs there. It also had a first-class suites that were designed for the enthusiasts that could afford to have a good seat in a good event. And then there was a flawless and beautiful and a very efficient press box that was located on the top tier of that building. So with that said, the Speedway's built. It attracted the Hollywood crowd on its opening day in August of 1970. Its first race was Labor Day. In that picture right there, you see David Lockton in a dark suit, and Tony Holman is right next to him in the convertible. So there was a lineage and a cooperative acknowledgement of both tracks helping each other somewhat. Indianapolis, without doubt, had its historical significance. This was a way of letting people see what Indianapolis could be and was. And then you see the hostesses that were in the that were part of the early years of the track. The hostesses worked in the restaurant as well as in the suites, much like you would find in a football or baseball game stadium today. It attracted the Hollywood crowd. In fact, its first offices were on Wilshire Boulevard in Hollywood.
Oh, I'll be darned.
And if I've got a brochure from that era, and it was the happening place to be. But let's go back to motorsports in general in 1970. What led up to this? At that time, motorsports was a very dangerous and very costly sport to be involved in. There were attempts to improve safety along the way, but basically the thrill of the race and the hero development at the time, drivers were moving from dirt tracks to corporate world environments, and this on track at Ontario lend itself to that burgeoning and developing world of professional motorsports.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I'll tell you something about this track. It had everything. It had every type of racing track on there. In fact, the drag strip being in the middle, quarter mile was just in the front straightaway. That's unheard of. It's a 2.5 mile track overall for the main road racing, for the NASCAR circuits, but that drag strip is just a killer, just to have that on there.
I've spoken to many professional drag racers, and they said that Ontario was actually one of the first tracks they ever had a professional garage, and that the drag strip was a how do I say this? It was so smooth that basically it was up to the driver to select what lane to run in, because they were pretty equal. And it was it it opened in a sold out ticket, were sold out, and Hollywood turned out. They had, and let me cite these names. Some of these names are no longer around anymore. You had James Garner, Paul Newman, you had Glenn Ford, you had John Wayne was out there, Scott Carpenter, the astronaut, the Gordon Cooper was there. It was a huge event, and it was the place to be. I remember the radio ads as a young kid hearing on KHJ in LA about the Ontario, the Big O was coming to Ontario, and they had a parade. They had first class movie stars, and we're talking about A-listers in a common Ontario city parade, which was Ontario. They just loved this. I mean, this was a huge event for them, and it was in their own backyard. So a couple of firsts with the track. The safety was paramount. You saw the wide angle of the track. It was on the drive line, the front straightaway and back straightaway were almost as wide as the pit lane.
Oh my.
And the seating was great. There was fan views all the way around the track. In fact, when Ontario was first proposed, before they started to dig in and build it, and then towards the beginning of the construction, the track was called Ontario Motor Stadium because the developers wanted to have a format of a baseball, football stadium environment. But then the Speedway kicked in.
So Mike, with your book, when do you plan to have that out?
Well, I'll tell you, this book has been a work in progress, and I started about a year and a half ago, and I had some great interviews with some very popular racers. And then unfortunately, COVID kind of hit and interrupted it, but it didn't stop me writing. I'm up to over 300 pages of documentation. I've uncovered over 5,000 official documents of not only the development, the construction, the operations, and unfortunately the destruction and termination of the track. So very all-encompassing.
Yeah, what's interesting, and it's sad because something so beautiful, and the only thing, there was not passion in the person that was leading it, because like you said, it was a collage of people, just like you had NASCAR France family, and Indy, you had the Holman family. It's basically where this was absolutely obsolete in that category, and that's why I mean, it's gone.
Right, and there were some outside things that occurred. They did not have a consistent management. There were, for lack of a better term, and that can be addressed in the book, there were some hiccups of opening and closure and scheduling issues. It had good intentions. I will tell you that the track was padlocked in late 1972, and Parnelli Jones and Tony Holman, with the aid of some of Parnelli Jones's business assistants and managers, rescued the track.
And that was after 2 years it opened?
Well, it was, yes, it closed in November of 1972, was padlocked. And there was no competition, no races at that time. There was a hiccup in that there was 2 NASCAR races run, in March of 71 and March of 72. There was supposed to be another NASCAR race in March of 73, but because the track was closed, it lost its scheduling line in with NASCAR. And basically, there was no 1973 NASCAR race. However, Parnelli saved the track, brought it back up to operational standards, and it was a wonderful speedway. In midsummer, they started to have programs. They developed they had the IndyCar race. They had the AMA motorcycle races, and then they developed a series of schedules that were more solid. I wanted to address something about Ontario at the grand opening.
Yeah.
they grand opening in August of 1970 opened with a major media coverage. It was covered in all the periodicals, not just motorsport periodicals, but in Time Magazine and some other common organizations. It was covered on network television. The race was broadcast on cable. I didn't have a post event like on Wide World of Sports at the time they would have. So with that said, big ideas, big momentum moving into 1971. Dave Lockton developed the idea of having a Formula One race. There was a company called Quester, and Quester was a sporting goods and plastics conglomerate based in the Midwest. And he opened this, the gentleman that ran it, Sandy Grieve, ran this idea of running a Quester Grand Prix. Well, to qualify for Formula One in the United States, to have a race here, at the time they wanted somewhat of a test bed race. So they ran Formula 5000 with IndyCar sports car racers that were here in the United States. And some of those guys were very well known. Mark Donohue, you had Al Unser, Bobby Unser, AJ Foyt. Sweet Savage was just beginning his career, was racing Formula 5000 in the Quester race. Then you also had Formula One. So you had Mario Andretti driving the Ferrari Formula One, you had Jackie Stewart, you had Joe Seifert in the BRM.
It started breathing again and everything came. You know, and I've trained on all those cars.
Yeah.
So I know I'm seeing each car as it goes, and that you're talking about it, and just it's immaculate. We have Doug Stokes that we've been talking about, but he mentioned there are so many people who are just waking up to what we had at Ontario Motor Speedway. He says, I'm looking forward to showing this book to a whole generation who missed this place. I mean, it's legendary history, I would say. But you said, we got to end because we're at the end of the thing.
Yes.
Just a snippet, you said there happens to be an abandoned Air Force base, right? Just never know, right?
Well, I'll tell you, there was some talk, and I tried to find you that data up at Castle, up in Central California. There was a Castle Air Force Base, and there was talk that they wanted to rebuild a replica of Riverside Raceway, which would have been pretty good, you know. But I haven't seen that story bear any fruit recently. So, but you know what? Never say never.
That's it. Well, we'll just say that, and we'll definitely want you back when we get this book done and some snippets leading up to it. Yeah, we want to help Doug out and you out, and good people that are really making a positive difference in the world of motorsports. So thank you so much for being here. Sure appreciate you, Mike.
I just wanted to close out real quickly. Doug has been he's been my wingman since I started writing, since the first page. And I couldn't do this without him. I have a huge amount of people who have been helping me behind the scenes. This is my first book. I'm writing it like it was my last book, and I'm giving 100%. This is not my story. This is a tribute to those that participated, those who dreamed that track, and those who went to view their heroes within those hallowed walls. I hope that you'll enjoy it. I hope I'm very positive that I should have it wrapped up by, I wanted it wrapped up by last September, which was the 50th anniversary of the race. But unfortunately, due to some extra interviews and some data that just dropped on me, I need to make sure that I embed that in the story. I think that I'm looking at maybe June or as early as May to have it at the editors, and then the cutting as they say, the cutting room floor starts, and hopefully I can keep the story as beautiful as it is laid out now. It will be a coffee table sized book, and it will cover the track from beginning to the end and then some. So I look forward to sharing that story.
Yes.
And I want to thank all those that have helped me with the interviews. and help me be a better rider. Thank you.
You're a hero. I mean, and in many ways. So I wanted to go ahead and just mention the passion that this man has, Mike Allen. You know, if you could capture that passion, are you kidding? I mean, just imagine what you can do. You can feel it in his voice and everything. We're going to have him back live next week. And I just carry this on. We're going to have a little bit of update every week. I just want to do that. And I just want to capture his, all that his gusto that he has in him and just take some of that, because it's just absolutely phenomenal to see this transformation and his expertise in teaching of all the work that he's done. So with that, I'm just so excited about this show tonight. I'm so glad that you joined us, from Steve Ford, the car guy, to our good friend. We're going to have a stop with a little commercial before we close out tonight. You guys are great. All right. And so what we want to do is just say thanks again, Mike Allen, for all that you do to benefit us and making a positive difference as an example and being passionate about something you truly care about. I want to say thanks to everybody that's been on tonight and everybody that's joined us. This has been phenomenal to learn together and grow together with 9atnight.com. And with 9atNight, there is from our car guy, seriously, Steve is amazing. He is definitely knows his stuff when it comes to it. We have just the experts around the country here each and every night with 9atNight. And again, a different topic every night. Just join us. The best way to do that is go to 9atnight.com and just scroll down on that homepage and you'll see hit the Zoom, and that's how you'll catch us live. We have some exciting stuff. Next week, we're going to be going live on multi-social media networks at the same time. So we've been getting geared up for that. So right now you can get the recording podcast at 9atnight.com/podcasts, and that's plural. So I'm Christine Campbell, your host with Christine and Friends. It's all about the drive tonight. Tomorrow, we're excited. It's going to be all about the talent. And we are so excited to have our guest on there. So join us again, and you have an incredible night and making a positive difference. Okay.